I guess let's start. I'll give my first name. My first name was Franz Wagner, and it's
Mhm.
not because Franz isn't very good. Look, this podcast is firmly slap the bag 2022. Franz, we're going all in. Every time Franz makes a three, I expect everyone to hashtag slap the bag 2022 or 2023. We're all in on Franz. The thing is, I feel like nobody noticed him last year when he was incredible. And I think he has a very real chance to make the All-Star team this year. That's my guy that I brought up earlier when I said, we talked about this off camera, I guess, or off stream. I said to you, I have two guys that I think are going to emerge into like real strong players, high level starters, and then one guy that I think can jump into being an all-star. Franz is the guy for me that I think has a legit chance to be an all-star. You watch what he was capable of doing at the Eurobasket level. It looked like he had leveled up substantially, even in terms of pacing, in terms of just comfort overall. Those are highly, highly competitive games. And I get that the spacing is a little bit different in Eurobasket kind of competition. I get that the athleticism levels are a little bit different there. But I think that with the additions of guys like Paolo, with the improvement of guys like Jalen Suggs, I think there's a very, very real chance that we see Franz become the number one option this year and be the guy on a much better Magic team than what people are expecting maybe.
Yeah, it's funny too because I'm not all the way in the like they're gonna make the play-in. I've seen some people say that I'm not there, but I think they're gonna be like, to me, like 34, 35 wins feels about right for this team. Because I think, I mean, even just watching last night, like they're gonna have some clear hiccups and issues that go on in the half court, but there's also like, I mean, part of this is as you got into your power with the 3-man weave, like, I mean, that team wasn't exactly, I mean, that Duke team wasn't exactly great at getting Powell the ball in places that made sense in a modern setting. And I think, in like 18 minutes of the first half last time, like, yeah, he's already been used in more inventive ways than he was most of the Duke season. Like, I'm just excited to see what that looks like. And I agree. I think with Franz, like last year, I was really high on him because I thought, even if like, I mean, there still were some of the shooting hesitancies last year, which honestly, I think it's more just, and someone I was talking to, not as meant as a flex, but like I was talking to John Quill Jones about this during the finals. Like, and for people who aren't aware, like John Quill, MVP of the WNBA 2 years ago, incredible shooter at 6'6", but also really capable of putting the ball on the floor. And she's still someone who like tries to figure out what is the balance between driving and shooting. And I think that's going to be huge for Franz this year, especially on a team that their spacing still kind of needs to be figured out. And he is arguably the best shooter in the starting lineup. So I'm interested to see what that looks like, because I think it's just adding like a half beat of decisiveness instead of having some of that almost like thinking too much about doing it. And it's kind of ridiculous to think about what that could look like for him if he's shooting 6 or 7 threes per game instead of, checking out of some of those. And as good as the drives can be, because I'm a big proponent of redrives and just continuing possessions, but there are more opportunities for him to really shoot the ball and take advantage of that. And like you mentioned with Eurobasket, I mean, I never quite know what to take away from international play sometimes, which, it feeds into a guy who ended up not making my list. But like, yeah, I totally see it. Like if he averaged 20 points plus per game this season, I don't think I'd be too surprised.
I think that's where I'm at. I think he's going to average 20 plus. We have a question here from LMFFFAAAO in the YouTube chat asking, how do you think the depth chart is going to work for the Magic? I mean, the answer is I have no fucking idea.
Yeah.
But like, I think that the guy that like kind of gums up the works there more than anything is Jonathan Isaac. If Jonathan Isaac ever comes back, like I actually think the depth chart is like somewhat sensible if he doesn't return. Like you get, 48 minutes from Wendell Carter and Mo Bamba. You get 30 minutes from Paulo, and then maybe slide Wendell Carter down to the 4 sometimes. You maybe slide Franz down to the 4 occasionally. You maybe slide him up to the 2 sometimes. You play Franz at the 3 most of the time. Obviously, their backcourt, you have guys like Markelle Fultz, Jalen Suggs, Cole Anthony that are going to play the 1 and the 2. And then Gary Harris is out for a little while now as well. So like, I get the role concerns, but I actually think that like in terms of finding like your 8 or 9 guys that you're going to go with, I think they might be okay in that regard early in the season, and it'll allow someone like Franz, particularly as like the top of the food chain, to be able to like really establish himself in a big way.
Yeah, in some ways too, I almost feel like not that it's never really good that there are injuries, but I think in some ways it's almost good that they're going to be forced to really play big. And I think put the ball in Franz's hands more, especially like you mentioned, like Gary Harris was huge for them last year and what he was able to do as a secondary creator and just be an active guard for them. Because I don't, again, not intended to slander, but like I am not a believer in the RJ Hampton running bench unit strain, which maybe they do that just to keep their
well,
keep some
I
of
think
their,
that what you do is you have Cole Anthony that can run the bench unit this year.
definitely.
And look, like honestly, he might start at point too, because I forgot that
Especially
it was
I
just
just mean
announced
with Markelle out for a little
in
bit too.
September. Yeah, that Markelle has like what is it, a broken toe, if I
Yeah, I
remember
think so.
correctly. So yeah, like it's tricky. It's a really tricky one. So yeah, I agree with you. The RJ Hampton bench experience is not going to go well. I don't want that.
Yeah, and I just think in some ways it's going to force the ball into like just forcing a lot more pick and roll playmaking from your bigs, which I'm excited about. Like some people saw Paolo playing the 3 yesterday, like, oh, that shouldn't happen. Like, no, man, I love it. Like, let's just see it. Why not? It's his rookie year. It's preseason.
Yeah.
I don't care. Just play funky, figure it out.
Well,
They're like
why
almost
wouldn't
my
you do
number one
that?
team to watch.
Just do that early in the season too. And
Yeah,
here's the thing with drafting Paulo and Franz, both of whom are 6'10". I don't. Have you seen Paulo in person yet?
I have not. I need
It's
to.
hard to explain how big he is. I wasn't sure if you went to summer league or not.
I was at
Like,
summer league, but I was honestly, it's funny. I feel like I was at summer league and I think I caught one game in person, so it was like one of those
yeah.
things. But
Yeah, like Paulo is like fucking huge. Like we'll be able to play the 5 at some point, I think. Like that's the biggest thing. Like I saw him at the Final Four. It's just like, oh my God. And I've seen him previously before that, like Nike Basketball Academy, places like that. You don't really recognize how big Paulo is until you see him in person. I've said that on the podcast a couple of times. The thing with Franz and Paulo though is that they're incredible ball handlers at that size. So like you can afford to do something like start Jalen Suggs and Terrence Ross. And while neither of those guys are like high level point guards necessarily, like at least Suggs isn't yet, as much as I love Jalen and I'm still all in on the Jalen Suggs experience at this point. They're not like high level, going to get everyone involved in all of the right places immediately from the jump guys at this point of their careers. Having guys like Franz and Paulo that can really handle the ball, that can initiate sets, it allows you to get a little bit creative on offense and run some things in the half court that, you can allow Jalen just to be the superstar in transition that he's capable of being and run the court that way. You can allow Franz to like come up from the corner off of like a screen from Paulo. You can have Paulo like just kind of duck in and try and get a seal on a switch because he's huge. And the guy that's guarding Franz at the 3 is probably still even a mismatch for Paulo. And then you can have Franz come up. You can have him take like a ball screen and just kind of roll offense that way. And, you have to hope that Jalen Suggs' shooting comes around in a somewhat substantial way. And I have some faith in that. Like, I think he's a worker. I think that we saw some good shooting indicators at Gonzaga. I think that last year was just kind of a mess with the hand injury and, a number of different factors there. So I don't know. Like, I think that they can get creative offensively in large part because of the marginal efficiencies or marginal inefficiencies, I guess, that Paulo and Franz allow for you in terms of size against other opponents.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think, I mean, even just like pointing to what they did last night, like there was a ton of, okay, Paolo is bringing the ball up in transition and they have guards out of corners setting pin-ins. So you can you're forcing a late switch and it's not even about like open. I think so many times people see stuff like even just like going to the Phoenix Milwaukee series, everybody talks about like, oh, well, Brook Lopez is switching and he's getting cooked. Like, no, he's switching, they're getting cooked behind him. And I think that's so much more what it is for me about Orlando. It's not about necessarily having these giant mismatch battles. It's more about like when you have guys with size who can play make and handle like that. I think it just creates so many more opportunities to really rearrange what the chessboard looks like defensively for a team. Like we saw the Cavs do this last year. Like Honestly, like the Cavs playing so big, but being able to just play simplistically was what made that offense, even if it wasn't perfect, like it was effective. Jared Allen, Evan Mobley high lows were just insane. And I think we're going to see a lot of the same stuff with the Magic, but even more expansion in the playbook. If you want to move off France, I can talk about my Magic guy now because I think this.
Oh, you have a guy on the Magic too.
I do have a guy on the Magic. I
almost asked you about this because I had a strange sneaking suspicion that you were going to.
I tweet about him like every day, so it's hard for me to not have him on the list.
Yeah, give me the name.
Wendell Carter Jr.
Okay, I thought it was going to be Suggs because I see you tweet about Suggs a decent amount too.
I love Suggs, but yeah, for me it's Wendell. I just like I don't know. Maybe I'm partially biased because I feel like this entire summer everybody's been trying to use him as a trade chip when he was Orlando's best player last year, pretty much the entire season. A lot of people like to point to Obama and say that he's the reason that Orlando's defense was so good. And like, no, man, A, watch Wendell, and B, look at the rim protection numbers too. Like he grew incredibly as a rim protector and just defensive player overall last year. Part of that is, not playing in a blitz everything defense, believe it or not, useful. But I think the biggest thing
I can't believe that someone did that. I honestly can't.
What a time to be alive. Jim Boylan just should go coach college. That should be a thing. But in terms of
don't put him around.
I mean, I'm
kids.
not putting that on college kids, but I'm just saying that's very much his speed. But like looking at Wendell though, like his handle got so much better last year. Like that was the biggest thing for me. And he got to a point, again, it's less about being a quote unquote mismatch nightmare, but he got to the point where he was too strong for any four to really guard him if he was able to get them and just catch in the mid post and go. He had like very little hesitation in his game, especially compared to what it was looking like in Chicago. He got up more volume from three, and I think there's still room for that to continue to improve. Again, like kind of like I mentioned with talking about like JJ and Franz, like finding that balance of like, okay, am I going to go set a flare screen or like, make this turn this into a quick DHO, quick hitter, or am I going to take the shot? Like, I think there's some room to improve that. But in terms of his aggression, attack in the basket and out of face-ups, I was incredibly impressed with it. I think this year to me is going to be more about, with hopefully better spacing in the offense, and just a little bit more dynamism in it overall. I think that there is real room for him to continue with that and being somebody who, with what he showed last year in terms of really taking the reins and being an aggressive player, like I don't know that he's necessarily going to be an all-star this year, but I do think he's trending towards that. Like to me, I thought he was a top 50 player last year. I think if he's able to keep improving his craft around the rim, which is going to be the biggest hindrance to him, becoming a more high-level scorer. To me, I'm there with him becoming a near all-star level player. And I just think like this year, I really hope people get to realize how special a player he is. Like, I don't love talking just about numbers and contracts, but I think automatically I would list him as one of like, if you're excluding rookie contracts, because that's cheating.
No, this is a bargain.
He has like one of the best contracts in the league in terms of what actual return value is going to be. And I think he just turned 25 or 24. No. So yeah. Oh no, he just turned. He's 23. What am I talking about? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, he turns 24 somewhat soon. Yeah.
So he's really, really good. A lot's going to depend on the three continuing to grow, but I'm a big believer in him.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in Wendell too. The guy that people compared Wendell to pre-draft was Al Horford all the time, right? Mm-hmm. Like that was just the guy, and he is going right along that trajectory. Like every single step of the way, it feels like. You mentioned a lot of like the weird, DHO stuff, the rescreen actions, coming off and, setting off-ball screens for guys that are just like really smart, just like these little like shimmy screens almost, where like he just like kind of steps up and like catches a guy like and gets his feet set real quick to be able to get Franz, for instance, free, or to be able to get Terrence Ross free coming up from the corner, right? Like it's just like it's little stuff like that he does that it doesn't show up in the box score. It's really sharp. And then on top of it, like the thing that people always expected from Wendell was the shooting, right? Like the shooting is what really opens up his game in like a pretty substantial modern way, right? Al Horford, it took Al Horford a while to like really become like a legit corner 3-point shooter or a legit, I'm going to take this pick and pop and knock down a shot, right? Like it just wasn't a huge part of his repertoire when he was 22, 23. It became one as he moved to the Celtics, right? Mm-hmm. Wendell's picking that up earlier in his career. And because of how much dexterity he has with the ball, because of how quickly he seems to process actions, it just allows you to flow into so many different offensive sets. And, to go back to our previous conversation about Franz and Paolo in the way that they kind of just allow for so many different mismatch nightmares for you, it is a little bit weird insofar as like, you're going to be able to switch a lot of those Franz, Paolo, Wendell actions, right? In like a strange way that might not be as much of like a mismatch situation, but you might almost be better off like running like 1-5s for Wendell as opposed to like the weird 4-5s and 3-5s that I think you and I like as like basketball nerds, we want to get super fucking creative and be like, let's do all this wild shit, right? And like not even that's like wild shit anymore, but like it's different and not every coach runs it, right? I wonder with Wendell, I wonder with the Magic, like you're going to be able to do a lot of wild shit, but like you're also going to want to like try and create as many mismatches and foster as many like strange situations. It's weird. I'm trying to like navigate in my head what they're going to look like as we're talking. Yeah. And I just don't know, I guess.
Yeah, it's funky because especially too, like, I mean, that's one of my favorite parts. Like Wendell's one of the 10 best screeners in basketball.
Yeah, he's unbelievable. So good at it. Unbelievable.
And I think to me, like it's like you were just mentioning, I think trying to find, especially like, it's not like, I think that there's almost been too much of a course correction that like ball stopping is bad. Sometimes you are just that freaking good. Like Paolo's going to get
like Trae Young should have the ball in his hands all the time. Exactly. That's why I'm like a little bit worried about the DeJounte fit because like there's probably diminishing returns on taking the ball out of Trae's hands and putting it in DeJounte's hands.
Exactly. And I think for me, like over the next couple of years, seeing how Orlando tries to find that, like finds more of like, okay, we're going to be in a flow while also knowing that we can really, because I mean, they're going to be, they're such an inside out team, which I'm excited about because I love watching inside out basketball I mean, they have like 3 really gifted interior passers already. But again, like I think especially with Wendell, his shot coming along even further, and being somebody who, especially like if he gets a 3 on him or a 4 on him, like I trust him to take it to the post, and even if he's not getting the ball in the basket, like he's getting fouled. He's just so strong for most people and quick enough to do it. So yeah, I'm very excited, especially too like defensively. Like he's not technically a 4, but like I'm comfortable with him playing on a lot of 4s. Especially when you're looking at, if he's able to play help side, he defended Joel Embiid probably the best that anybody did one-on-one last year, which granted, that's not everything, but I think he's really shown his mettle as an actual post defender. And I mean, going at Embiid offense with it was very late season, but I think they played 2 games within like 4 or 5 days of one another against the Sixers in like February last year. And those were 2 of Wendell's brightest games. So I'm very excited to see this Magic team play, man. I could just list off all the Magic players, and hopefully this is Chuma Okeke's year, but we'll see.
Yeah, like it is interesting. Like I'm trying to pull up like the on-off numbers. Like I think that one of the things that the Cavs taught us last year, right, in terms of defense, is just how valuable it is to have length out there, right? Yeah. How valuable it is just to have that constant presence of rim protection. If a team pulls Jared Allen away from the basket, having Evan Mobley there on the weak side. But to do that and to make that work, you have to have this guy that is capable of switching, that is incredibly technically sound, that is incredibly smart rotationally. I think that Carter, while he's nowhere near as mobile and as athletic as Mobley, his technical defensive skills are just so high level in terms of his footwork and in terms of, again, his processing ability. Like he is just really, really sharp. I know that like, people on the podcast probably got sick of listening to Cole Zwicker talk about how fucking good Wendell Carter was in terms of processing the game before Cole got hired by Houston. Like it's absolutely accurate. It's the way that it is. Like he is a super, super smart processor of basketball at the end of the day. And, I'm looking here at just what the defensive rating numbers were when Carter and Bamba were out on the court. The problem with the Carter Bamba lineups was offense. It wasn't defense.
Yeah.
Like they couldn't really figure out the spacing because while Mo, he can shoot a little bit, teams don't really respect him out there. They're pretty comfortable with him shooting, and he doesn't really pass it at a super high level. Like you don't get the like it's kind of the same thing. Like you watch Miles Turner all the time,
Yes.
right? Because
Yeah,
you write for Indie Cornrows. Like it's a similar deal where, because Miles doesn't have a lot of dexterity with the ball and like doesn't really dribble all that well, teams are just like, okay, we'll close out hard if we have to. He probably can't hurt us that way. But if he takes the shot, like we're kind of good with it regardless. And what that does is it kind of gums up the rest of the offense, even though he gets, talked about as the shooter, right? It's kind of a similar effect with Mo Bamba in terms of the way that offense kind of functions with him, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the action is either dying or going in the hoop with him, and it can look great from play to play, but process wise, it never ends up being awesome. So I think him re-signing was actually one of the more kind of surprising things to me in free agency.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see I still think he's got utility. It's just where they're going. It's really odd. So I don't know. We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, the team that I thought should have looked at him was Phoenix. Like I think Phoenix would have been interesting, like using Mo as like a backup center. And I like Mo. Like I think Mo can be a top 30 center in the league. It's just gonna probably not be here, and it's probably gonna need to be in like more of like a 5-out scheme with a lot of ball handling that works, because he does have real rim protection skill. He is like going to make a lot of money playing basketball. Like he's really, really good. It's not really, really good, but like he's a good player. It's just like this fit, it is going to gum things up a little bit for Paolo and Franz and guys like that. To kind of close off the loop on the Magic, you kind of mentioned that you're going to be interested to see how these guys develop over the course of the next few years. I kind of think it's going to be fine. Like, I think that like, because Franz is so good at moving without the ball, being unselfish, but also being efficient and processing the game quickly, knowing when it's his turn, being able to make good shot selection decisions, because Wendell Carter is incredibly smart and intelligent and processes things quickly, does all of the little things, incredible screener, has some shooting potential. I think that like you can just allow Paolo to grow naturally and organically into this high level role as being like the primary creator. And it doesn't take as much off the table of someone like Franz is what like the traditional usage would necessarily, I guess, especially given that Paolo is such a good passer. Like that was the thing that I said pre-draft. Like I think he was the best passing, like I think he was the best passer in the lottery that was taken. Like it was either him or Dyson Daniels. So I think that having three guys that can really pass, that are unselfish, that make plays, process the game really well, it's going to help when they try and figure out the role definitions of them in that team moving forward.
Yeah, no, I agree totally. And I mean, just like you hit on too, I think the last thing I'd have to say, I mean, like Paolo is just going to be so good, man. Like
you had Paolo at 1, didn't you?
Paolo was 1 for me the entire way.
Yeah.
Like that's not trying to beat my chest, but like, I just think like watching what he did last year, yeah, man, it was easy to like, I'm just so excited for him. He's that Magic team's gonna be so fun.
Yeah, no, I love Paolo. I'm excited for him. I had him below Jabari and I had him below Chet, and we're not going to get to see Chet, and I'm a little bit disappointed about that.
Me too.
But I am excited for Paolo. Like Paolo is so good at basketball. He's so fun.